The iron shackles bit into Mara's wrists as she stood on the auction platform, trying to keep her chin raised while dozens of human eyes stripped away what little dignity she had left. The border town of Ashford had seen many slave auctions before, but the arrival of an orc woman always drew a particular kind of crowd. Mara could feel their hatred mixed with curiosity. Their disgust mingled with something darker that made her skin crawl beneath its green hue. Her small tusks caught the afternoon light as she breathed slowly through her nose, refusing to let them see her fear. She had been a warrior once, had hunted in the northern forests with her clan, had laughed around fires and sung the old songs. Then the raiders came in the night, iron nets falling like deadly rain, and everything she knew had burned. The auctioneer, a balding man with a voice like gravel, gestured toward her with theatrical flair. "Fine specimen here, gentlemen. Strong as an ox, could work your fields from dawn till dusk without complaint, or perhaps you have other uses in mind." He leered, and several men in the crowd chuckled knowingly. Mara's jaw clenched, her pointed ears flattening slightly against her skull. She would not break. She would not give them the satisfaction. "We will start the bidding at 50 silver pieces," the auctioneer announced. A portly merchant in fine clothes immediately raised his hand. 50 silver. 60, called a rough-looking farmer with cruel eyes and hands that looked like they knew how to wield a whip. 75, came another voice, this one from a man who owned the mines south of town. Mara had heard whispers about those mines, about orcs who went in and never came out. The bidding continued, climbing higher. Each number felt like another chain wrapping around her future, each new voice promising a different flavor of misery. She scanned the crowd, trying to memorize faces, wondering which one would become her master, wondering how long it would take her spirit to finally shatter. Then she noticed him. He stood at the back of the crowd, taller than most, with broad shoulders beneath a simple brown coat. His dark hair fell across his forehead, and unlike the hungry or hateful expressions surrounding him, his face was difficult to read. He was not smiling, not sneering. He simply watched, his gray eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable in a different way than the others. 100 silver, the mine owner called out, clearly determined to win. The human at the back straightened slightly. 125, someone else countered. 150, the mine owner growled, irritation creeping into his voice. The auctioneer grinned, sensing the competition was heating up. 150 silver pieces. Do I hear more? This is a rare opportunity, gentlemen. Orc women are not often available in these parts. Mara felt sick. The mine owner would win. She could see it in his triumphant posture, the way he crossed his arms as if already claiming his prize. Then the man in the back spoke, his voice carrying clearly across the square. 200 silver pieces. The crowd fell silent, heads turning. Even the auctioneer blinked in surprise. 200 silver was more than most families in this town earned in a year. The mine owner's face reddened. 225. 300, the tall man said calmly, as if discussing the weather. Gasps rippled through the audience. The mine owner opened his mouth, then closed it, calculating. His eyes narrowed as he studied his competition, perhaps trying to determine if this was a bluff. 325, he finally said, though his voice had lost some of its confidence. 500. The finality in those two words silenced the entire square. The mine owner stared, his face purpling with rage and disbelief. 500 silver pieces was a fortune. It was madness. 500 silver pieces, the auctioneer repeated, his voice almost reverent. He looked around the crowd hopefully. Do I hear more? 500 going once, going twice. He paused, but no one spoke. Even the cruelest bidders knew when they had been beaten. Sold to the gentleman in the back. Mara's heart pounded as the tall human made his way through the parting crowd. Up close, she could see he was younger than she had first thought, perhaps in his late 20s. His face was weathered from sun and wind, and there was a scar along his jawline that spoke of violence survived. But his eyes, those gray eyes, held something she had not expected to find in this place. Kindness. No. She shook her head slightly, dismissing the thought. No human paid 500 silver out of kindness. Whatever he wanted from her would be worse than the mines, worse than the fields. Men did not spend fortunes unless they expected something extraordinary in return. The auctioneer handled the transaction quickly, accepting a heavy purse with barely concealed glee. Keys were produced, and the iron shackles around Mara's wrists were removed, only to be replaced by a simple rope tied loosely around her hands. Her new owner accepted the rope's end and nodded his thanks. "Come on," he said quietly, the first words he had spoken directly to her. Mara had no choice but to follow as he led her through the dispersing crowd. She caught fragments of conversation, speculation about what the stranger planned to do with his expensive purchase. Some of the suggestions made her tusks grind together. They walked through the town's dusty streets in silence. Mara studied her surroundings, noting exits and weaknesses out of habit, though she knew escape was unlikely. The rope around her wrists was loose enough not to hurt, but she was exhausted, half-starved, and had no idea which direction her homeland lay. Even if she ran, where would she go? At the edge of town, a sturdy gray horse was tied to a post. The man untied it and swung up into the saddle with practiced ease. For a moment, Mara thought he would make her walk, but instead he held down his hand. "Can you ride?" he asked. She stared at his outstretched hand, confused. "What?" "Can you ride a horse? Or do you need to ride behind me?" "I can ride," she said slowly. Her people rode the great wolves of the north, but she had been on horses before. He nodded and helped her up, his grip firm but not painful. She settled in front of him, acutely aware of his presence at her back. This close, she could smell pine and wood smoke and something else, something earthy and clean. They rode out of Ashford as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The man did not speak, and Mara did not ask questions, though 1,000 of them churned in her mind. The landscape shifted from the dry scrubland around the town to rolling hills dotted with scattered trees. After perhaps an hour, they turned onto a smaller path that wound through a dense grove of oak and maple. Finally, they emerged into a clearing. A modest homestead sat nestled against the hillside, with a small house, a barn, and what looked like a workshop. A vegetable garden grew near the house, and chickens pecked at the ground in their pen. It was simple, well-maintained, and utterly unexpected. The man dismounted and helped Mara down. She stumbled slightly, her legs stiff from the ride, and he steadied her with a hand on her elbow. Once she was stable, he released her immediately and reached for the rope around her wrists. Mara tensed, but he simply untied it and tossed it aside. "You are free to go," he said. She stared at him. "What? You are free?" He repeated it as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "There is a stream about a quarter-mile that way." He pointed west. "It runs north and will eventually lead you to the border territories. I do not know where your people are, but that is your best chance." He walked past her toward the barn, leading his horse. Mara stood frozen, her mind refusing to process his words. This had to be a trick, some kind of cruel game. She watched as he unsaddled the horse, his movements efficient and unconcerned. He was not watching her. He was not threatening her. He was simply tending to his animal as if she were not there. "Why?" The word burst from her before she could stop it. He paused, glancing back at her. "Why what? Why did you buy me? Why pay 500 silver just to let me go? He set the saddle on a rack and began brushing down the horse. Because those other men would not have. That is not an answer. He was quiet for a moment, his hands moving steadily through the horse's coat. I spent 3 years in the war, he said finally. Fought on the Eastern Front against the Orc clans, killed more of your people than I can count. Was told it was necessary, that orcs were monsters, that we were protecting our families. He paused, his jaw tightening. Then one day I was injured, separated from my unit, should have died in that forest. An orc woman found me. She could have killed me easily, should have killed me. Instead, she bandaged my wounds and left me food. Never spoke, never came close enough for me to see her face clearly, but she saved my life. Mara felt something shift in her chest. So this is repayment, maybe. He finished with the horse and finally turned to face her fully. Or maybe I am just trying to live with myself. I cannot undo what I did in the war, cannot bring back the dead, but I can do this. I can make sure you do not spend the rest of your life in chains. She searched his face for deception, for hidden motives, but found none. He meant it. This human stranger had spent a fortune just to set her free, expecting nothing in return. The stream is that way, he repeated, pointing. You should go before dark. There are wolves in these woods, and while they probably would not bother an orc, it is safer to travel by daylight. Mara looked toward the west, where freedom waited. She could walk away right now, could try to find her way back to her people if any of them still lived, could reclaim some piece of the life that had been stolen from her. But she looked back at the homestead, at the simple house with smoke curling from its chimney, at the man who had asked nothing of her. When did you last eat? He asked, noticing her hesitation. Her stomach answered before she could, growling audibly. She had not had a real meal since her capture, just scraps and stale bread, barely enough to keep her alive, something that might have been a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Come inside. I will make you something before you go. Common sense told her to refuse, to run while she had the chance. But hunger and exhaustion and the strange, unexpected kindness in his offer made her nod. She followed him to the house. Inside, it was sparse but clean. A simple wooden table with 2 chairs, a fireplace with a cooking pot hung over glowing embers, shelves with basic supplies. No decorations, no personal touches. It was the home of a man who lived alone and did not expect company. Sit, he said, gesturing to one of the chairs. Mara sat cautiously, ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. But he simply moved to the fireplace and began preparing food. She watched as he added water to the pot, then vegetables and dried meat from his stores. His movements were practiced, efficient. This was not a man who relied on servants or expected others to cook for him. What is your name? She asked quietly. He glanced at her, surprise flickering across his face as if he had not expected the question. Warren Parrish. I am Mara. Mara, he repeated, testing the name. He nodded. It is a good name. They fell into silence again as he cooked. Mara found her eyes growing heavy, the warmth of the house and the smell of food making it hard to stay alert. She forced herself to remain upright, to keep watching him, but her body was betraying her, the days of fear and hunger taking their toll. You can rest if you want, Warren said without looking at her. I will wake you when the food is ready. I do not trust you, she said bluntly. Smart. He stirred the pot. But I promise you are safe here, at least for tonight. Mara wanted to argue, wanted to maintain her walls, but she was so tired, so very tired. Her eyes drifted closed despite her best efforts, and her head slowly lowered toward the table. She jerked awake when Warren touched her shoulder gently. Food is ready. She sat up quickly, disoriented, her hand going instinctively to where her dagger should have been before remembering it had been taken long ago. But Warren was simply setting a bowl of stew in front of her, steam rising from the thick broth. "Eat," he said, sitting down across from her with his own bowl. Mara picked up the spoon, her hands shaking slightly. The first bite was heaven. She had forgotten food could taste like anything other than ash and desperation. The vegetables were soft, the meat tender, the broth rich and warming. She forced herself to eat slowly, but it was difficult not to simply devour it like an animal. Warren ate quietly, not commenting on her hunger. When she finished her first bowl, he refilled it without being asked. She ate that one too, more slowly this time, and finally felt the gnawing emptiness in her stomach begin to ease. "Thank you," she said when she was done, the words feeling strange in her mouth. She could not remember the last time she had thanked a human for anything. "You are welcome." Warren collected the empty bowls and set them aside. "There is a room in back. It has a bed. You can sleep there tonight if you want. Leave in the morning when you have more strength." Mara studied him carefully. "Why are you helping me? I told you. No, you told me why you bought me, not why you are feeding me, offering me shelter. You could have just pointed toward the stream and sent me away." Warren leaned back in his chair, his gray eyes meeting hers. "Would you have made it? Weak from hunger, exhausted in a strange land. You would be dead by morning, either from cold or wolves or collapsing in the woods. What would have been the point of freeing you just to watch you die?" It was a practical answer, but Mara sensed there was more beneath it. This man carried guilt like a physical weight, and he was trying to lighten it the only way he knew how. "I will stay tonight," she said finally, "but I leave at first light." "Fair enough." He showed her to the back room. It was small, with just a narrow bed and a single window. But the blankets looked clean and soft, and after weeks of sleeping on cold stone, it seemed like luxury. Warren left her alone, closing the door behind him, and Mara stood in the middle of the room trying to process everything that had happened. She was free. Actually free. The human had asked nothing of her, had placed no conditions on her release. She could walk out right now, and he would probably let her go without protest. So why did she feel so uncertain? Mara sat on the edge of the bed, testing it. The mattress gave slightly under her weight, and she could not help the small sigh of relief that escaped her. She lay down fully clothed, too wary to undress, and pulled the blankets over herself. Sleep took her quickly, dragging her down into darkness where she did not dream. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of an axe striking wood. For a moment, she forgot where she was, her hand reaching for weapons that were not there, her body tensing for a fight. Then memory returned and she sat up slowly, her muscles aching from exhaustion that one night could not cure. The house was quiet. Mara crept to the door and opened it carefully, peering out. The main room was empty, but there was fresh bread on the table and a cup of what smelled like herb tea. The front door stood ajar, and through it she could see Warren outside, chopping wood with steady, rhythmic strokes. She approached the table cautiously, half convinced this was still a trap. But the bread was real, still slightly warm, and when she tore off a piece and tasted it, she found it was good. She ate standing up, watching Warren through the doorway. He had removed his coat despite the morning chill, and she could see the strength in his arms and shoulders as he worked. He moved with the efficiency of someone who had done this task 1,000 times, who knew his body and trusted it. There was something almost meditative about the way he chopped wood, as if the repetitive motion brought him peace. Mara finished the bread and drank the tea, which was earthy and slightly bitter but warming. Then she stepped outside. Warren noticed her immediately and stopped, resting the axe against the chopping block. "Morning," he said. "Sleep well." "Yes." She looked toward the west where the stream waited. Freedom waited. "Thank you for everything," he nodded. "There is a pack inside with some supplies. Food, a water skin, a knife. It is not much, but it should help you get wherever you are going." Of course he had prepared supplies. This man who owed her nothing, who should by all rights hate her kind, had spent the night putting together things to help her survive. "Why?" she asked again, because she still did not understand. Warren picked up his axe, weighing it in his hands. "My father was a farmer. Taught me that the land gives back what you put into it. You plant seeds, you tend them, you harvest. Simple. Fair. The war taught me the opposite, that you can take and take and take, and all you get back is blood and ash." He looked at her finally. "I do not want to take any more, Mara. I just want to give something back, to try to balance the scales even a little." She wanted to tell him it was impossible, that the scales could never be balanced. But the words caught in her throat, because who was she to crush this man's fragile hope? "I should go," she said instead. "Probably." But he did not sound happy about it. Mara went back inside and found the pack he had mentioned. It was well stocked, with dried meat, hard cheese, bread wrapped in cloth, and a hunting knife in a leather sheath. The knife alone was worth several silver pieces. She strapped it to her belt, feeling more complete with a weapon at her side again. When she came back outside, Warren was splitting another log. She stood there, pack on her shoulders, freedom calling her name. All she had to do was walk away. "Your garden needs weeding," she heard herself say. Warren froze mid-swing. He lowered the axe slowly and turned to face her. "What? Your garden? The weeds are choking out some of your vegetables. You will lose half your crop if you do not tend it soon." He blinked, clearly confused about where this was going. "I was planning to get to it tomorrow. I could do it today, as repayment for the food and shelter." Something complicated crossed Warren's face. Hope, maybe, mixed with concern. "You do not owe me anything, Mara. I did not help you to put you in debt. I know. But winter is coming. A garden that size, tended properly, could feed one person through the cold months. 2 people if they are careful." She paused, her heart pounding. "I have nowhere to go, Warren. My clan is either dead or scattered. I do not know this land. Going north might lead me to my people, or it might lead me to more slavers. More chains. At least here I know what I face." "Me," he said quietly. "You face me. And you do not know me at all. You are right. But I know you paid 500 silver to set me free. I know you fed me and gave me shelter with no expectation of reward. I know you cannot look at me without guilt in your eyes, which means you have a conscience." She stepped closer. "Let me stay, Warren. Just for a while. I will work. I will earn my keep. And when spring comes, if I want to leave, you will let me go. No chains. No strings." He studied her for a long moment, and she could see him wrestling with the decision. "People in town already talk," he said finally. "They saw me buy you. If you stay here, they will assume things. Bad things. It will make your life harder. My life has been hard since the day I was born an orc in a world that hates my kind," Mara said flatly. "I can handle gossip." Warren's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. "You are stubborn." "Yes," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "All right, you can stay. But not as a slave or a servant, as a guest. You work if you want to, but you are free to leave whenever you choose. And you sleep in that back room with a lock on your door. I will not have you afraid in my house." Relief washed through Mara, so strong it almost made her dizzy. She had not realized how much she dreaded going back out into the unknown until he agreed to let her stay. "Thank you. Do not thank me yet. Winter here is brutal, and I am not the best company. You might regret this decision." "Maybe," Mara said, "but at least it will be my decision to regret." That actually made him smile, a real smile that transformed his serious face into something warmer. "Fair enough. Welcome to my home, Mara, such as it is." She smiled back, her tusks catching the morning light, and for the first time since her capture, she felt something that might have been hope. The first few days were strange, both of them navigating the awkwardness of their arrangement. Warren showed her around the homestead, explaining his routines and where things were kept. He raised chickens for eggs, kept a small vegetable garden, and made his living as a woodworker. The workshop she had seen was full of half-finished furniture, projects commissioned by families in town or nearby farms. Mara started with the garden as promised, pulling weeds and thinning overcrowded plants. The work was meditative, her hands in the soil connecting her to something primal and good. Warren watched her sometimes from his workshop, and she could feel his eyes on her, but it did not feel threatening, just curious. They spoke little at first, exchanging only necessary words. But gradually, as comfort grew, conversations began to emerge. Small things at first. Comments about the weather, questions about tools and techniques. Mara learned that Warren had bought this land 3 years ago after leaving the military, that he had built most of the structures himself. Warren learned that Mara had 3 brothers, all warriors, all probably dead, that she had loved tracking prey through the northern forests, reading signs in broken twigs and disturbed earth. "Could you track something here?" Warren asked one evening as they ate dinner. He had started cooking larger portions, enough for both of them, and they had fallen into a routine of eating together. Probably. The techniques are the same, even if the land is different. She tore off a piece of bread. "Why? Something has been getting into my chicken coop. Lost 2 birds last week. I have set traps but caught nothing. Show me tomorrow. I will see what I can find." The next morning, Mara examined the coop carefully. The predator was clever, she had to give it that. It had found a gap in the boards near the ground, just wide enough to squeeze through. The tracks in the soft earth were distinctive. "Fox," she said, pointing them out to Warren. "Young one, probably male. He comes from the east through the tree line, always at night. He is following a game trail." Warren crouched beside her, studying the tracks. "Can we catch it?" "We can try. Foxes are smart, but they are also creatures of habit. If we set a trap along his route, camouflage it properly, we might get lucky." They spent the afternoon setting up a humane trap, one that would catch the fox without killing it. Mara used her knowledge of tracking to position it perfectly, disguising it with leaves and branches. Then they waited. 3 nights later, the trap was sprung. They heard the fox's distressed cries just after midnight. Warren grabbed a lantern and they hurried outside together. The fox was indeed young, its red fur gleaming in the lamplight, its eyes wild with fear. "What now?" Warren asked. "Now we relocate it. Far enough that it will not come back, close enough that it is still in familiar territory." They transported the trapped fox several miles away and released it near a stream where Mara had spotted signs of abundant prey. The animal bolted the moment the trap opened, disappearing into the night. "Thank you," Warren said as they walked back. "I would have just killed it." "It was just trying to survive," Mara said. "No different than us." Something in Warren's expression shifted, softened. "You have a kind heart." The words made her uncomfortable. Orc hearts are not supposed to be kind. "According to humans, we are monsters." "Some humans are idiots," she laughed, the sound surprising them both. It had been so long since she had laughed that she had almost forgotten how. Warren smiled at the sound, and for a moment, something passed between them in the darkness. Something fragile and new. Autumn deepened, the leaves turning brilliant shades of red and gold. Mara settled into the rhythm of the homestead, finding peace in the work. She tended the garden, harvested vegetables, helped Warren repair the barn roof. Her strength returned, her body recovering from the ordeal of slavery. The haunted look in her eyes began to fade, replaced by something calmer. Warren, for his part, seemed to relax around her. He talked more, shared more. Told her stories about growing up on his father's farm, about his mother who had died when he was young. Mara shared her own stories, carefully edited to avoid the most painful memories. They began to exist in a state of careful companionship, not quite friends, but no longer strangers. One evening, Warren came back from town with a troubled expression. Mara was stirring a pot of stew over the fire and noticed immediately. "What is wrong?" she asked. He set down the supplies he had purchased and sat heavily in a chair. "Talk in town is getting worse. People are asking questions about you, about why you are still here." Mara's stomach tightened. "What kind of questions?" "The kind I do not want to repeat." His jaw clenched. "But the merchant's wife, Sarah, she suggested that if you are staying here, maybe you should come to town sometime. Show your face. Let people see you are not being held against your will. You want me to go to town." The thought made her skin crawl. The last time she had been in Ashford, she had been standing on an auction block. "No," Warren said quickly. "I do not want that, but Sarah has a point. If you stay hidden here, people will invent their own stories, probably worse than the truth." Mara considered this. Part of her wanted to hide forever, to never face those hateful human eyes again, but she had never been a coward and she would not start now. "All right," she said. "I will go to town with you next time." Warren looked surprised. "Are you sure?" "No, but I will do it anyway." 3 days later they rode to Ashford together. Mara sat behind Warren on the horse this time, her arms wrapped around his waist. She could feel the tension in his body, could tell he was as nervous as she was. The town was busy when they arrived, people going about their daily business. Heads turned as they rode past. Conversation stopped. Mara kept her chin up, her face carefully neutral, even as she felt the weight of their stares. Warren stopped at the general store, helping Mara down before tying up the horse. "Stay close to me," he murmured. They went inside together. The shopkeeper, an older man named Thomas, looked up from his counter and did a double take when he saw Mara. To his credit, he recovered quickly. "Warren," he said, nodding, "and Miss Mara, welcome." The use of her name, spoken with respect rather than derision, caught her off guard. "Thank you." Warren conducted his business, ordering supplies for the coming winter. Mara wandered the shop, looking at goods she had not seen in months. Fabric, tools, jars of preserved fruits. Normal things. Peaceful things. The door opened behind them and 3 women entered. Mara recognized one of them from the auction crowd. The woman's eyes widened when she saw Mara, and she whispered something to her companions. "Here it comes," Mara thought, bracing herself. But instead of hostility, one of the women stepped forward. She was middle-aged, with kind eyes and work-worn hands. "You must be Mara," she said. "I am Sarah, Sarah Bennett. My husband mentioned you." This was the merchant's wife who had suggested she come to town. Mara nodded cautiously. "Yes." "Welcome to Ashford," Sarah said warmly. "I know the circumstances of your arrival were unfortunate, but Warren is a good man. If he vouches for you, that is good enough for me." The other women murmured agreement, though one looked less certain. Still, they were not threatening her or calling for her removal. It was something. "Thank you," Mara managed. "If you ever need anything or just want to talk, my shop is on Main Street," Sarah continued. "Do not be a stranger." The women completed their purchases and left. Mara stood there, slightly stunned. Warren finished his transaction and joined her. "That went better than expected," he said quietly. "Yes," Mara agreed, though she was not sure what to make of it. They stopped at 2 more shops, and while there were plenty of hostile looks and muttered comments, there were also surprising moments of civility. A farmer's wife nodded politely. A young boy stared at Mara's tusks with open curiosity rather than fear. The town was not accepting her, not by a long shot, but there were cracks in the wall of hatred. Small ones, but present. On the ride home, Mara felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. "That was not as terrible as I feared," she admitted. "Small victories," Warren said. "We will take what we can get." Winter arrived with sudden ferocity, snow falling in thick blankets that transformed the homestead into a white landscape. Mara and Warren worked together to prepare, insulating the house, stocking firewood, preserving the last of the garden's harvest. The work was hard but satisfying, and Mara found herself grateful for the shelter and companionship. They spent the long evenings inside, the fire crackling in the hearth. Warren would work on small projects, carving decorative details into furniture pieces. Mara learned to mend clothes and helped prepare meals. They talked more now, conversations flowing easily about everything and nothing. One night, a blizzard struck with howling winds that rattled the windows. Mara sat near the fire, wrapped in a blanket, watching the snow pile against the glass. "First real winter storm," Warren commented, settling into the chair across from her. "We will be snowed in for a few days." "I do not mind," Mara said. "It is peaceful." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, then Warren spoke again, his voice quiet. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "What happened to your clan? You do not have to tell me if you do not want to, but I have wondered." Mara was quiet for a long moment, the memories sharp as broken glass. But somehow, in this warm room with this man who had shown her nothing but kindness, she found the strength to speak. "Slavers came in the night," she said. "Humans, but not soldiers. Mercenaries, I think. They had iron nets and knew how to use them. We fought, but they were prepared and we were not. I saw my brothers die trying to protect our mother. Saw my father take an arrow to the chest. I tried to reach them, but the nets were too strong. They took me and a dozen others, left the rest for dead." Warren's face was pale. "I am sorry. It was not your fault, was not it?" His voice was bitter. "I fought in that war, Mara. Maybe I did not wield the nets, but I killed your people, burned your villages. I was part of the machine that made you an enemy, that made your lives worth less than ours. You were a soldier following orders. That is not an excuse." "No," Mara agreed. "It is not. But you are trying to be better now. That has to count for something." He looked at her, his gray eyes full of pain and something else, something that made her breath catch. "You are a better person than me, Mara. I doubt that." She pulled the blanket tighter. "We both carry ghosts, Warren. The question is what we do with them. What do you do with yours?" "I try to honor them by surviving, by living when they could not, by finding moments of peace and holding on to them." She met his gaze. "By trusting people I should not trust. Me." "Yes." The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Warren leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I do not deserve your trust. Probably not. But you have it anyway." Outside, the wind howled, but inside, warmth grew, not just from the fire, but from something deeper, something that scared Mara more than chains ever had. The winter months passed slowly, the world reduced to the homestead and the land immediately around it. Mara and Warren settled into a domestic rhythm that felt both strange and natural. They cooked together, worked together, sat by the fire together. The more time she spent with him, the more she noticed small things. The way his hands moved when he carved wood, skilled and confident. The rare smile that transformed his serious face. The patience he showed when teaching her new skills. And the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention. Like she was something precious. Something worth protecting. It terrified her. One afternoon in late winter, Mara was chopping wood behind the house when the axe slipped. The blade caught her left hand, slicing deep across her palm. She gasped, dropping the tool, blood welling quickly. "Damn it," she hissed, pressing her other hand over the wound. Warren was at her side in seconds, having heard her cry out from the workshop. "Let me see," he said, gently prying her hand away. His face paled when he saw the gash. "Inside. Now." He led her to the house, sat her at the table, and fetched his medical supplies. Mara watched as he carefully cleaned the wound, his touch gentle despite the urgency. "It needs stitches," he said. "I know. Go ahead." He threaded a needle with practiced efficiency and began to sew. Mara gritted her teeth, her tusks cutting into her lower lip, but did not make a sound. Warren worked quickly, his concentration absolute. "Almost done," he murmured. "You are doing great." When he finished, he bandaged her hand carefully. "You need to keep that clean. Change the dressing twice a day and no heavy work for at least a week." "A week? I will be fine by tomorrow, Mara." His voice was firm. "Let it heal properly, please." The please did it. She nodded reluctantly. "Fine." Warren did not let go of her hand immediately. He held it gently, his thumb brushing the edge of the bandage. "You scared me," he said quietly. "It is just a cut, I know. But for a moment I thought—" He stopped, shaking his head. "Never mind." "What?" He finally met her eyes. "I thought I might lose you, and I realized that would be unbearable." Mara's heart stuttered. "Warren." "I know," he said quickly. "I know this is complicated. I know we come from different worlds. I know there are 1,000 reasons this is a terrible idea. But I need you to know. You have become important to me, Mara. More important than I ever expected." She should have pulled away. Should have reminded him that she was Orc and he was human, that their people had been at war, that any relationship between them was doomed from the start. But instead, she turned her hand in his, lacing their fingers together. "You have become important to me too," she admitted. "I did not want you to be. It would have been easier if you had been cruel or indifferent. But you are neither of those things, and now I do not know what to do with these feelings." "What do you want to do with them?" It was a dangerous question, an invitation to something that could not be taken back. Mara looked at their joined hands, at the contrast of his skin against hers, human and Orc, and knew that stepping forward meant stepping into unknown territory. "I want to see where they laid," she said finally. "I want to stop being afraid of what might happen and just let myself feel." "If you want that too," Warren smiled, that rare, transformative smile that made her chest tight. "I want that more than anything." He raised her uninjured hand to his lips and kissed it gently. The touch sent warmth spreading through her body, and she realized with sudden clarity that somewhere along the way, she had fallen in love with this quiet, guilt-ridden human who chopped wood and carved furniture, and tried to balance scales that could never be balanced. Spring came late that year, snow melting reluctantly to reveal muddy earth and the first green shoots. Mara's hand healed cleanly, leaving only a thin scar across her palm. The homestead came back to life, and with it, new routines and new possibilities. Warren and Mara did not rush into anything. They were both too careful for that, too aware of the fragility of what was growing between them. But there were more touches now. His hand on her shoulder as he passed, her fingers brushing his as they worked side by side. They sat closer by the fire, close enough that their arms touched, and neither pulled away. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and pink, they stood together near the garden. Warren had his arm around her waist, and Mara leaned into him, marveling at how natural it felt. "I need to go to town tomorrow," Warren said. "Big furniture order to deliver. Will you come with me?" "Do you want me to, always?" He squeezed her gently. "But I will not force you. I know town is difficult." "It is getting easier," Mara admitted, "and I want to be with you." The words hung in the air, simple but profound. Warren turned to face her, his hands coming up to cup her face. "Mara," he said, his voice rough, "May I kiss you?" she answered by closing the distance between them. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, both of them testing these new waters. But when Mara's tusks did not seem to bother Warren when he deepened the kiss with a soft sound of pleasure, something inside her broke open. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, and he responded by holding her tighter, as if afraid she might disappear. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Warren rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he whispered. "I know it is fast, I know it is complicated, but I love you, Mara." "I love you too," she whispered back, the words feeling like both a confession and a promise. "Against all reason and logic, I love you." He kissed her again, and this time there was no hesitation, no holding back. They stood there as the sun set, wrapped in each other, and for the first time since her capture, Mara felt truly free. The trip to town the next day was different. They rode together, Mara's arms around Warren's waist, but this time there was a new awareness between them, a new connection that felt unbreakable. They stopped at the Bennett's shop to arrange delivery of the furniture. Sarah took one look at them and smiled knowingly. "Well," she said, "it is about time." Warren laughed, actually laughed, and Mara found herself smiling too. "That obvious?" he asked. "Only to everyone with eyes," Sarah said. "You two have been circling each other for months. I am glad you finally figured it out." Other reactions were less positive. The farmer who had bid on Mara at the auction glared at them with undisguised hatred. A woman crossed the street to avoid walking near them. But there were also surprises. Thomas, the shopkeeper, congratulated them gruffly. A young couple smiled and waved. The town was divided, but Warren and Mara had allies, and that mattered. They completed their business and headed home, the furniture delivered and payment collected. As they rode back through the spring countryside, Mara felt something she had not experienced in a long time: hope. Real, tangible hope for the future. Summer brought warmth and long days of work. The garden flourished under Mara's care, producing more vegetables than they could possibly eat. Warren's woodworking business grew, word spreading about his skill and reliability. They worked hard, but they also found time to simply be together. Long walks through the forest, swimming in the stream on hot afternoons. Evenings on the porch, watching the stars emerge, they were happy. It was that simple and that complicated, but happiness, Mara had learned, was always fragile. The trouble started in midsummer. Warren had gone to town alone to pick up supplies, leaving Mara at the homestead. She was working in the garden when she heard horses approaching. 3 of them, moving fast. Mara straightened, shading her eyes against the sun. 3 men rode into the clearing, and she recognized one immediately. The mine owner who had bid against Warren at the auction. Her stomach dropped. "Well, well," the mine owner said, dismounting. His 2 companions followed suit. The orc girl, all alone. Mara backed toward the house slowly, her mind racing. The knife Warren had given her was inside, but she would never make it to the door before they caught her. "Warren will be back soon," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Will he?" The mine owner smiled unpleasantly. "Funny, because we just saw him heading south toward the Miller farm. He will be gone for hours." They had been watching, planning. Mara's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to stay calm. "What do you want?" "I want what I paid good money for," the man said. "You see, I invested a lot of capital at that auction. Should have been mine. But your lover outbid me, and I have been wondering if maybe we could come to an arrangement." "There is no arrangement. I am not for sale." "Everything is for sale, girl, and you are not exactly in a position to argue." The 3 men spread out, flanking her. Mara evaluated her options. She was strong, but 3 grown men were too many without a weapon. If she ran, they would catch her. If she fought, she would lose. But she would not go without a fight. "Warren will kill you if you touch me," she said, baring her tusks. "Warren is a coward and a traitor to his kind," the mine owner spat. "Consorting with monsters, it is disgusting. We are doing him a favor." They moved in unison, and Mara did not wait. She charged the nearest man, using her greater strength to knock him down. Her elbow connected with his face, and he yelled in pain. But the other two were on her immediately, grabbing her arms, wrestling her to the ground. "Feisty," one of them laughed. "Boss is going to have fun with this one." Mara fought with everything she had, kicking and twisting, but they were prepared. One of them produced a length of rope, and they began to bind her hands. Panic clawed at her throat. Not again. She could not go back to chains again. Then a voice rang out across the clearing, cold and deadly. "Let her go." Everyone froze. Warren stood at the edge of the clearing, and he was not alone. Behind him were 5 men from town, including Thomas the shopkeeper and Sarah's husband, Marcus, and they were all armed. The mine owner's face went pale. "Warren, this is not what it looks like." "It looks like you are assaulting my partner on my property," Warren said, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. "Thomas, Marcus, are you seeing this?" "We see it," Marcus confirmed grimly. Warren stepped forward, and something in his eyes made the men holding Mara release her immediately. She scrambled to her feet, ripping the rope from her wrists, and ran to Warren's side. He pulled her behind him protectively, never taking his eyes off the mine owner. "You have 2 choices," Warren said. "You can leave now and we forget this happened. Or we can take this to the town council and you can explain to everyone why you attacked an innocent woman. Your choice." The mine owner looked at his companions, then at the armed men backing Warren, and apparently decided his odds were not good. "This is not over," he hissed. "Yes," Warren said flatly. "It is. If you come near her again, if you threaten her or me or anyone we care about, you will regret it, and that is a promise." The 3 men mounted their horses and rode off, leaving nothing but dust and tension behind. The moment they were gone, Warren turned to Mara, his hands running over her arms and shoulders, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt?" "Did they?" "I am fine," Mara said, though she was shaking. "You came back. I realized I forgot to tell you something this morning, so I turned around. Saw them heading this way and knew something was wrong. Got Thomas and Marcus and came as fast as I could." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "God, Mara, if we had been any later, you were not." She buried her face in his shoulder, letting the fear finally show. "You saved me." "Again, always," he whispered. "I will always come for you." The other men approached carefully. Thomas cleared his throat. "Miss Mara, are you all right?" She pulled back from Warren but kept his hand in hers. "Yes, thank you, all of you," Marcus nodded. "The mine owner has been trouble for a while. This might be the evidence we need to deal with him properly. We will take this to the council." "What will they do?" Warren asked. "Depends. But harassment and assault are serious charges. At minimum, he will be fined heavily. Might even lose his business license." Marcus looked at Mara. "We will need your testimony." The thought of facing the mine owner again made Mara's stomach turn, but she nodded. "Whatever you need." True to their word, Thomas and Marcus brought the incident before the town council. Mara gave her testimony, her voice steady despite the hostile stares from some council members. But she also had supporters now. Sarah spoke on her behalf, as did several others who had gotten to know her over the winter and spring. The council deliberated for 2 days. In the end, the mine owner was fined a substantial amount and forbidden from owning slaves or indentured servants. It was not perfect justice, but it was something. And more importantly, it sent a message that Mara was under the town's protection. Word spread. The attacks stopped. Slowly, cautiously, a new normal emerged. Autumn came around again. marking a full year since Warren had bought Mara's freedom at the auction. They stood together in the garden one evening, surveying the harvest. It had been a good year, both for the crops and for them. "Do you ever think about leaving?" Warren asked suddenly. "Going back to find your people?" Mara considered the question. She had thought about it, especially in the beginning, but the truth was her people probably did not exist anymore. The clan had been destroyed, survivors scattered. And even if she found them, she was not sure she belonged there anymore. She had changed too much. "This is my home now," she said. "You are my home. I do not want to be anywhere else." Warren pulled something from his pocket. A ring, simple but beautiful, carved from dark wood with a thin band of silver inlaid. "Then stay," he said, dropping to one knee. "Stay forever. Marry me, Mara," her breath caught. Marriage between humans and orcs was rare, sometimes forbidden. But looking at Warren's hopeful face, at the ring he had clearly made with his own hands, all the logical reasons to say no evaporated. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he stood and kissed her, and Mara felt like she was flying. They were married a month later in a small ceremony. Sarah and Marcus stood as witnesses, along with Thomas and a handful of others from town. It was not the wedding either of them might have imagined years ago, but it was perfect in its simplicity. The priest, a progressive man from the next town over, spoke of love transcending boundaries and differences. He blessed their union without hesitation, and when he pronounced them married, the small group erupted in applause. Mara wore a simple dress that Sarah had helped her make, and Warren wore his best clothes. They exchanged vows under an oak tree near the homestead, the autumn leaves falling around them like blessings. "I promise to stand by you in all things," Warren said, his voice steady and sure. "To protect you, to honor you, to love you until my last breath." "I promise to build a life with you," Mara replied, tears streaming down her green cheeks. "To face whatever comes with courage, to be your partner in all things, to love you without reservation or fear." They kissed as husband and wife, and Mara felt the final chains of her past life fall away. She was no longer a slave, no longer a captive. She was Warren's wife, his partner, his equal, and he was hers. The celebration was modest but joyful. Sarah had brought food and they ate under the stars as the fire crackled. Stories were told, laughter rang out, and for a few precious hours, the weight of prejudice and past pain lifted. When everyone finally left and they were alone, Warren carried Mara over the threshold of their home, both of them laughing. "Mrs. Parrish," he said, setting her down gently. "How does it feel?" "Strange," she admitted. "Wonderful, terrifying, all of the above," he agreed. He took her hands in his. "Thank you for choosing me, for choosing this life. I know it was not easy." "Nothing worth having is easy," Mara said. She pulled him close, resting her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "But this, us, it is worth everything." They stood there in the doorway of their home, holding each other as the night deepened around them. Outside, the world continued with all its complications and prejudices. But inside, they had built something simple and true: love, partnership, home. Winter came again, their first as a married couple. The homestead felt different now, not just Warren's house with Mara as a guest, but truly their home. They made decisions together, planned for the future together. Warren taught Mara to read and write in the human language. Mara taught Warren some of the old orc songs, her voice rising in melodies that spoke of mountains and forests and the freedom of the hunt. They were happy in a way that felt almost magical, as if they existed in a small bubble apart from the rest of the world. But reality, as it always does, intruded. A messenger arrived on a cold January morning. his horse exhausted from hard riding. Warren answered the door to find the young man nearly frozen and quickly brought him inside. Mara made hot tea while Warren helped the messenger warm up by the fire. "I have news from the capital," the messenger said once he could speak without his teeth chattering. "The king has issued a decree. All marriages between humans and non-humans are to be annulled. Those who refuse will face criminal charges." The words hit like a physical blow. Mara's hand tightened around her cup, the ceramic creaking under the pressure. Warren's face went white, then red with anger. On what grounds? He demanded preservation of human purity, prevention of conflict, the usual justifications. The messenger looked uncomfortable. "I am just delivering the message, but you should know the decree is being enforced. Soldiers are being sent to key regions to ensure compliance." "When?" Mara asked, her voice hollow. "Soon, maybe a month, maybe less." After the messenger left, well-fed and with a few coins for his trouble, Warren and Mara sat in silence. The fire crackled, the only sound in the suddenly suffocating room. "We could run," Warren said finally. "Head north, past the border territories. Find somewhere the king's law does not reach. And leave everything we have built. This home, your business, the life we made." Mara shook her head. "We would be fugitives, always looking over our shoulders. Better than losing you." "You would not lose me, we would still be together." "As what? Unmarried partners living in sin according to their law." Warren's voice was bitter. "They want to erase what we have, Mara, to say it never mattered. Then we do not let them." She stood, pacing the room like a caged wolf. "We fight. We find others like us, we make our voices heard. Against the king's decree, we would be crushed, maybe, but maybe not." She turned to face him. "You told me once that you could not undo the past, but you could try to balance the scales. This is how we do it, Warren. We stand up and say that love matters, that our marriage matters, that we will not be erased." Warren stood and came to her, taking her hands in his. "You know what will happen if we fight. We could lose everything. They could take you from me, put you in chains again or worse." "I know." Her voice was steady despite the fear coursing through her. "But I would rather fight and lose than surrender without trying. I was a slave once, Warren. I will not let anyone make me less than I am ever again, not even a king." He searched her face, and something in his expression solidified. The guilt and hesitation fell away, replaced by determination. "All right," he said. "Then we fight, together." They started by reaching out to others. Mara and Warren were not the only interspecies couple in the region. Through careful inquiries and Sarah's network of connections, they found 3 other couples facing the same threat. A human woman married to an elf, 2 human men with orc wives, 1 human married to a half-giant. They gathered at Warren and Mara's homestead on a snowy February evening. The group was small but determined, and together they drafted a petition to the king. It spoke of love and loyalty, of families built across racial lines, of the hypocrisy of punishing people for choosing partnership over prejudice. They collected signatures, not just from those directly affected, but from sympathetic townspeople. Sarah signed, Thomas signed, Marcus and his wife signed. Others added their names slowly at first, then with growing momentum. 100 signatures, 200, 500. The petition was sent to the capital with a delegation of 3 people, including Mara. Warren had not wanted her to go, fearing for her safety, but she had insisted. "If we are going to ask for recognition, they need to see who they are trying to erase," she had argued. "They need to look me in the eye and say my marriage does not matter." The journey to the capital took 2 weeks. Mara had never seen a city before, and the sheer size of it overwhelmed her. Buildings stacked upon buildings, streets teeming with people, the noise and smell and chaos of so many lives packed together. She hated it instinctively, longing for the quiet of the homestead. They were granted an audience with a royal advisor, not the king himself but someone with his ear. The man listened to their petition with a bored expression, barely glancing at the signatures. "Your concerns are noted," he said dismissively when they finished. "But the decree stands. It is for the good of the realm." "How is destroying families for the good of the realm?" Mara demanded, her tusks bared. "How is telling people their love is invalid beneficial?" The advisor's eyes narrowed. "You are Orc. Your people warred against us for generations. This decree prevents future conflicts by ensuring clear lines between species." "My people are dead," Mara said flatly. "Killed by humans. I have no clan, no army, just a husband who loves me and a home we built together." "What conflict do we represent?" "The precedent," the advisor said coldly. "If we allow one exception, we must allow all, and that leads to chaos." "Or it leads to understanding," one of the other delegates said, "to a future where our children are not defined by the mistakes of the past." The advisor stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "The decree stands. I suggest you comply before enforcement arrives." Peacefully dissolved marriages will face no penalties. Resistance will be met with the full force of the law. They left the capital with no victory, but they had tried. Mara sent word to Warren immediately, then began the long journey home. She arrived to find the homestead in an uproar. Soldiers had come through the region, posting notices and interviewing couples. Enforcement was beginning earlier than expected, and several families had already been torn apart. Warren met her at the door, pulling her into a fierce embrace. "Thank God," he breathed. "I was so worried." "We failed," Mara said, the words like ash in her mouth. "They would not listen." "I know. Sarah sent word." He pulled back to look at her. "The soldiers will be here within a week. We have to decide, Mara. Do we comply or do we run?" She looked around at their home. At the furniture Warren had built with his own hands. At the garden she had tended through 2 full seasons. At the life they had carved out of hope and defiance. "We run," she said, "but not far, and not alone." Over the next few days they gathered their allies. 8 couples, 16 people total, all facing the same threat. Together they formed a plan. They would leave the settled lands and head into the frontier, past the edge of the king's effective control. There they would build a new community. A place where interspecies families could live without fear. It was risky, almost insane. The frontier was dangerous, full of wild animals and harsh conditions. But it was also free. And freedom, Mara had learned, was worth any price. They left under cover of darkness, a caravan of wagons loaded with supplies. Sarah and several other townspeople came to see them off, pressing food and tools into their hands with tearful goodbyes. "You are brave," Sarah told Mara, hugging her tightly. "Braver than most. I hope you find the peace you deserve." "Thank you," Mara said, her own eyes wet, "for everything, for seeing past what I am to who I am." "That is what decent people do," Sarah said firmly. "Now go, build your new home, and if things ever change, come back to us." The journey north was hard but not impossible. They traveled through early spring, watching the landscape change from settled farms to wild forest. After 3 weeks they found it. A valley with a clear river, surrounded by protective hills, with good soil and abundant game. It was perfect. They set to work immediately. Warren's woodworking skills were invaluable as they built simple houses. Mara's hunting abilities kept them fed. The elf man was a skilled healer. The half-giant could move stones that would have taken 6 humans to shift. Everyone contributed, and slowly, a community took shape. They called it Haven, and the name felt right. This was a haven from prejudice, from laws that sought to define love by species rather than substance. Children were born that first year, beautiful mixed-heritage babies who represented the future they were fighting for. Mara stood in the doorway of her and Warren's new home one evening, watching the sun set over the valley. Warren came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Happy?" he asked. "Yes," she said and meant it. "This is not what I expected when you bought me at that auction." "What did you expect? Slavery, misery, maybe death?" She turned in his arms to face him. "Instead, I found you, found this, found a life worth living." "I found the same," Warren said softly. "You know, I sometimes think about that day, about what would have happened if I had not been in town, if someone else had bought you." "I would have escaped eventually," Mara said with confidence, "and probably died trying, but you were there, and you gave me a gift more precious than freedom. You gave me hope." "You gave me redemption," Warren countered, "a chance to be better than I was. To build something good instead of just destroying." They kissed as the sun finally dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Around them, their community settled in for the night. Smoke rose from chimneys, children's laughter echoed across the valley, and somewhere a voice was singing an old orc ballad that had been adapted with new words about frontier life. It was not perfect. They faced challenges every day, from harsh weather to dangerous predators to the constant worry that soldiers might find them. But they faced those challenges together, united by bonds stronger than blood or species. Mara had been a warrior, a slave, a refugee. Now she was a wife, a community leader, a symbol of what was possible when people chose love over hate. She had come so far from that auction block, from the chains and fear and desperation, and she had arrived finally at home. Years passed. The community of Haven grew and thrived. More families found their way to the valley, drawn by rumors of a place where interspecies relationships were not just tolerated but celebrated. The population swelled to over 100 people, a mix of humans, orcs, elves, and others who had been marginalized by the king's decrees. Mara and Warren's home expanded too, not just in size but in occupants. Their first child, a daughter named Kira, was born in their third year in Haven. She had her mother's green-tinted skin and small tusks, but her father's gray eyes and gentle spirit. 2 years later came their son, Marcus, named after the merchant who had stood by them in Ashford. He looked more human but had his mother's strength and fierce independence. Warren's woodworking skills were in high demand, and he trained several apprentices, passing down his craft. Mara became the community's primary hunter and scout, ranging far into the wilderness to track game and ensure their safety. Together, they were pillars of Haven, respected and loved. One autumn day, nearly 7 years after their arrival, a messenger came to Haven. Not a soldier, but a young woman from Ashford, dressed in travel-worn clothes and carrying urgent news. "The king is dead," she announced to the gathered community. "His son, the new king, has repealed the marriage decree. Interspecies unions are legal again." Silence fell over the crowd, then erupted into cheers. People hugged, cried, celebrated, but Mara felt strangely ambivalent. She found Warren in the crowd and they moved away from the celebration to talk privately. "We could go back," Warren said quietly. "Return to the homestead. Resume our old life." "Do you want to?" Mara asked. He looked around at Haven, at the community they had helped build, at the children playing in the street. "I do not know," he admitted. "Part of me misses the simplicity of our old life. But this place, what we have created here, it is important. These people need us." "They do," Mara agreed, "and I am not sure I want to leave. This is our home now, Warren. We built it with our own hands. Our children were born here. Our friends and family are here." But we could visit Ashford, Warren suggested. See Sarah and Thomas. Show them what we have built. That idea had merit. Mara nodded slowly. Yes, let us do that. Let us show them that we did not just survive. We thrived. The journey back to Ashford took 2 weeks, and Mara felt strange returning after so many years. The town had changed. New buildings stood where old ones had burned. New faces walked the streets. But some things remained the same. The general store was still there. The Bennett shop still operated. Sarah cried when she saw them, pulling both Mara and Warren into a fierce hug. I hoped, she said through tears. I hoped you had made it. When we heard about Haven, some of us dared to believe it was you. They spent 3 days in Ashford, reconnecting with old friends and telling stories of their new life. Interest was high, and several families expressed a desire to visit Haven, maybe even to move there. The valley was becoming more than a refuge. It was becoming a beacon. On their last night, Mara and Warren walked to the edge of town, to the spot where the auction block had once stood. It was gone now, torn down years ago when the slave trade was officially banned. Grass grew where she had once stood in chains. Seems like a lifetime ago, Warren said. It was a lifetime ago, Mara replied. We are different people now, better people, she considered the question. I do not know about better, but more complete, more whole. You gave me the chance to become who I was meant to be, Warren, not a slave, not a victim, but a woman who chose her own path. We chose our path together, Warren corrected gently. Everything we have we built as partners. Yes, Mara agreed, taking his hand. And I would not change a single moment. Even the hard parts led us here, to this place, to this life. They stood there as the stars emerged, remembering and honoring the journey that had brought them from that awful auction block to the peace and love they had found. It had not been easy. The road had been hard, filled with danger and prejudice and moments of despair. But they had walked it together, and that had made all the difference. The next morning, they began the journey back to Haven, back to their children and their community and the life they had built. Mara looked back once at Ashford, at the place where her new life had truly begun, and felt nothing but gratitude. She had been bought and set free. But more than that, she had been seen and valued and loved. Warren had given her freedom, but together they had built something even more precious. A home, a family, a future. And as they rode toward Haven, toward the valley that held everything they cared about, Mara knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Years continued to pass in Haven, each season bringing new growth and new challenges. The community evolved from a desperate collection of refugees into a thriving village with its own culture, blending human and orc traditions with those of the elves and other races who had joined them. They celebrated holidays from multiple cultures, sang songs in different languages, and raised children who knew nothing of the prejudices that had forced their parents to flee. Mara's role shifted as she aged. She still hunted, but less frequently, training younger members of the community in tracking and wilderness survival. She found herself increasingly drawn to teaching, to passing down the knowledge of her people before it was lost forever. She taught the old orc language to any child who wanted to learn, human or otherwise. She told stories of the northern forests, of great wolf hunts and winter celebrations around massive fires. Warren's workshop became a center of the community, always full of apprentices learning the craft. But his greatest joy was watching his children grow. Kira became a skilled healer, learning from the elf physician and developing her own techniques. Marcus inherited his father's talent for woodworking and his mother's strength, becoming a bridge between human and orc ways. One spring evening, when Mara was in her early 40s and Warren was nearing 50, they sat together on the porch of their home. watching the sunset paint the valley in gold and crimson. Their hair showed threads of gray now, and lines etched their faces, but the connection between them remained as strong as ever. "You have any regrets?" Mara asked, a question she had wondered about but never voiced. Warren was quiet for a moment, considering. "No," he said finally. "Not about you. Not about this. Sometimes I regret the man I was during the war, the things I did. But those regrets led me to you, and I cannot regret that. Even though loving me cost you your old life, your home, your business in Ashford, the simplicity you once had." "Especially because of that," Warren said firmly. He took her hand, his thumb tracing the scar on her palm from that long-ago accident with the axe. "You know what my life was before you. Empty. I went through motions, built furniture, pretended the ghosts did not haunt me. But I was not really living. You changed that. You made everything matter again." Mara felt tears prick her eyes. Even after all these years, he could still surprise her with his capacity for love. "I was so afraid that day at the auction," she admitted. "When you bought me, I thought I was facing a fate worse than death. I could not have imagined that the man outbidding those cruel monsters was actually my salvation." "You saved yourself," Warren said. "I just opened the door." "You are the one who chose to walk through it, to stay, to build this life with me." "We saved each other," Mara concluded. "You gave me freedom and I gave you purpose. Fair trade, I think." Warren laughed, that warm sound she had come to love. "Fair trade," he agreed. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared and the first stars emerged. From somewhere in the village, music started playing. One of the young people had learned to play the flute, and the melody drifted across the valley like a blessing. "I want to be buried here," Mara said suddenly. "When my time comes, in this valley under these trees, not in some human cemetery or orc burial ground, here where we built our life." Warren squeezed her hand. "Me too. Together like everything else." "Together," Mara echoed. More years passed, and Haven continued to flourish. The repeal of the marriage decree meant that communication with the outside world increased. Trade routes were established. Some families chose to return to their original homes, finding that the world had changed enough to accept them. But most stayed, preferring the community they had built to the societies that had rejected them. Mara and Warren became the village elders, respected for their wisdom and the example they set. Young couples would come to them for advice, asking how they had made their unlikely marriage work. The answer was always the same: honesty, respect, and choosing each other every single day, even when it was hard. On the 20th anniversary of their arrival in Haven, the community threw a massive celebration in their honor. There was food and music and dancing. People gave speeches about how Mara and Warren's courage had made Haven possible, how their love had shown that bridges could be built across any divide. Mara felt overwhelmed by the outpouring of affection. She had never sought to be a leader or a symbol. She had simply wanted to live her life in peace with the man she loved. But somehow, that simple desire had sparked something larger, had created a place where dozens of families could thrive. When it was her turn to speak, she stood before the gathered crowd, Warren at her side as always, and felt the weight of all those eyes upon her. 20 years ago, she began, her voice carrying across the valley, I stood on an auction block in Ashford, believing my life was over. I was a slave, my people were dead, and I faced a future of servitude and suffering. Then a human man I had never met paid an impossible price for me, 500 silver pieces, a fortune, and he did it for one reason only, to set me free. She paused, looking at Warren, who smiled encouragingly. I could have walked away that day. He pointed me toward the stream, told me which direction to go, and let me leave. But I stayed. Not because I had to, but because I saw something in this man that I had never expected to find in a human. Kindness, compassion, a desire to do what was right, even when it cost him dearly. Over time, kindness became friendship, friendship became love, and love became this. She gestured around at the village. All of you, this community, this future we are building together. Warren did not just set me free from chains. He set me free to become fully myself, and in doing so, he freed himself from the guilt that had imprisoned him. We freed each other, and that freedom created space for all of you to find your own. The crowd erupted in applause. Mara felt tears streaming down her face, but they were good tears. Happy tears. Warren took her hand and spoke next, his voice rough with emotion. I was a soldier who became a farmer who became a woodworker, but my most important role, the one I am proudest of, is being Mara's husband. She taught me that love does not know boundaries. That family is what you build, not what you are born into. That courage means choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. Buying her freedom was the easiest decision I ever made. Loving her, building a life with her, creating this place with all of you, that was harder. But it was worth every moment of difficulty, every challenge, every sacrifice. Because at the end of the day, I get to go home with this remarkable woman, and that makes me the richest man alive. More applause, more tears. The celebration continued late into the night, music and laughter filling the valley. Mara danced with Warren under the stars, their movements slower than they once were, but no less filled with joy. As the night wound down and people began to drift home, Mara and Warren walked hand in hand to their house. They did not speak, did not need to. Everything that mattered had been said. Inside, they prepared for bed with the comfortable routine of decades together. As they lay down, Mara curled into Warren's side, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me. That day at the auction, you could have seen a monster, a savage, a thing to be used, but you saw a person, you saw me. And that changed everything." Warren's arms tightened around her. "Thank you for staying, for choosing me when you could have chosen freedom, for building this life with me." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, their breathing synchronized. Outside, Haven slept peacefully, a testament to what was possible when people chose love over fear. The years that followed were gentle. Mara and Warren grew old together, their bodies slowing but their love never diminishing. They watched their children have children of their own, beautiful grandchildren who played in the same valley where their parents had been raised. They saw Haven grow from a village into a true town, complete with a school, a proper meeting hall, and even a small library. When Mara was 65 and Warren was 73, his health began to fail. The years of hard work had taken their toll, and his body was tired. They both knew his time was coming, but they did not speak of it, focusing instead on the present moment. One autumn evening, as they sat on their porch watching another sunset, Warren turned to Mara with a peaceful expression. "I've had a good life," he said. "Better than I deserved. You gave me that." "We gave each other that," Mara corrected, her voice thick with unshed tears. "And we are not done yet." "Maybe not quite yet," Warren agreed. "But soon. And I want you to know, Mara, that if I could go back and do it all again, I would not change a thing. Every moment with you has been a gift, even the hard ones, especially the hard ones. They made the good ones sweeter." He took her hand, his grip weak but steady. "Promise me something. When I am gone, do not shut yourself away. Keep living, keep teaching, keep being the heart of this community. They need you." "I need you," Mara said, the tears finally falling. "You will always have me." Warren touched her chest over her heart. "Right here. Every day, every moment, I will be with you." They sat together as the sun set one last time, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Warren fell asleep in his chair, Mara's hand in his, and when she checked on him an hour later, he was gone. Peacefully, painlessly, with a smile on his face. Mara sat with him for a long time, holding his hand, saying goodbye to the man who had changed her life. The man who had seen her as a person when the world saw a slave. The man who had loved her without reservation, who had built a home and a family and a legacy with her. The funeral was attended by the entire town. They buried Warren in the valley he had helped tame, under a great oak tree that Mara would visit every day for the rest of her life. The marker was simple, carved by Marcus with his father's own tools. It read, Warren Parrish, beloved husband, father, grandfather, friend. He taught us that freedom is the greatest gift one person can give another. Mara lived another 12 years after Warren's death. She grieved, but she also continued living, honoring his last request. She taught the next generation, told stories about the man who had bought an orc woman at auction and set her free, then won her heart. She watched Haven continue to grow, saw it become a symbol of hope for interspecies families across the realm. When her own time came, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, Mara died peacefully, Warren's name on her lips. They buried her next to him under the oak tree, and her marker read, Mara Parrish, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, friend. She taught us that love knows no boundaries. Haven thrived long after both of them were gone, their legacy living on in the community they had built and the example they had set. The story of the human man who outbid every cruel man at the auction for an orc woman, then simply set her free, became legend. Parents told it to their children, who told it to theirs, keeping alive the memory of a love that had transcended species, prejudice, and circumstance. And in that valley, under that great oak tree, two souls rested together, their journey complete, their love eternal, their story a reminder that sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply choosing to see the humanity in someone the world has decided is other. Warren had made that choice on an auction block in Ashford, and it had changed everything. Not just for Mara, not just for him, but for generations who would come after, who would look at their story and believe that a better world was possible. Because in the end, that was what love did. It built bridges where walls had stood. It created hope where despair had reigned. And it proved, over and over, that the smallest act of kindness, the simplest choice to do what was right instead of what was easy, could change the entire world. Warren bought Mara's freedom. But together they had found something far more precious. They had found home, they had found purpose, they had found each other, and that was the greatest treasure of all.